very good morning to you and welcome to Morning Express. My name is Trix Ingado. Today on the show, we give you an overview of what's being covered by local and international press. Coronavirus is still a huge story both locally and internationally. We shall be giving you the numbers and the stories that are in the papers about that. But far from that, there's so much more that's being covered that we are going to be digging deeper into with our guest Agri Chabeda, who's joining us, and he is a governance expert. But before we get into that, let's take a look at what's making headlines internationally, and we're starting off this morning with the Daily Monitor this day that's telling us about news that's making headlines in that East African nation. It says God wants peace, not violence. This is according to Archbishop Luanga. Now, what's been happening in that country has been the crackdown on dissidents, and of course it is campaign season, and obviously we have seen the deaths that have occurred after a crackdown on protests in Uganda. So take a look at that and see what's making headlines in the neighboring Uganda. But far from that, let's take a look at what's happening still in the East African region, and I believe The Citizen is the next paper that we shall be taking a look at. That is from Tanzania. We're told parents voice concern over exam disqualifications. Now, this has to do with the education situation in Tanzania. Some parents whose children were disqualified by the National Examination Council of Tanzania over alleged cheating in this year's Standard 7 national exams have called on the body to relook on that situation. The figures are being given there, and we're also being given an overview of the infection rates in the region, and Kenya is leading with over 70,000 infections recorded. Then we have the BBC here telling us Trump accepts transition to Biden must begin. The president says a key federal agency should do what needs to be done, but he vows to fight on. That is President-elect Biden. And then Qatar identifies parents of baby found at an airport. And then we're told about John Kerry named as Biden's climate, the person who's going to be steering the climate agenda for the United States. The former Secretary of State is among the names announced for key roles in the U.S. new administration. Far from that, let's move to the CNN and see what's making headlines. Of course, politics is the biggest story. Right there, we're having Biden told transition can formally begin. Trump administration informs Joe Biden that they are ready to begin the formal transition process. A letter obtained by the CNN says this is devoid of a formal concession. And then we have 5 takeaways from that United States election situation. Then last but not least, we have The Guardian telling us Trump agrees to begin transition as key agencies call Biden apparent winner. So, of course, if you need to know more details of what's happening internationally, take a look at those papers and see what's making headlines. But far from that, we have, to take a look at what's making the headlines and closer to home. As I told you before, Agri Chabeda is joining us to take a look at what's making news headlines locally. And the BBI is one of the biggest stories this morning. We're told BBI Reggae plays on, and this is after President Uhuru Kenyatta, an ODM leader, apparently, according to the Daily Nation this morning, shut the door on negotiations. We're told in the Standard that the President Uhuru Kenyatta, an ODM leader, set to launch collection of 1 million signatures for the BBI tomorrow in a drive that will last a week, signaling that there is no going back on said report. Of course, this is the main conversation we're going to be having this morning, but I would like the sentiments of Agri Chabeda on this one as we kick off the press review.
First of all, thank you for having me. I think if we go to fast forward, we have elections in 2022 by August. So the referendum, if it takes place, has to be completed and everything done and dusted by August 2021. So with that, in that context, I think time was running out for getting the referendum to get going. I think we have seen there has been a lot of debate as to whether to reopen and discuss. I think a time has come when a decision has been made that either it's not going to take place, and if it has to take place, it has to go ahead now. So I think the lines have been drawn. President Kenyatta and Prime Minister Raila Odinga are going to drive the push for the signatures. Whether they will allow for any changes, I personally highly doubt. This now leaves our Deputy President in a position whereby he will either have to support or campaign against it.
There were hopes for a consensus, and that would have been arrived at by having other views accommodated in this. What do you make of that, given that this is a document that is said to be, that is supposed to unite people as opposed to have a sort of a level of divisiveness? So when you see those people who are being outspoken about the situation with the document as it is not being accommodated or not having their views accommodated, and this push going forward, what do you make of that, and what does that bode for the country?
Personally, I think there's been an effort by certain groups to derail, for one reason or another, the whole process. And I think part of the debate on having other views was to delay the process until possibly there isn't enough time for it to take place, and that it goes off the rails. In any process, there has to be a time when people give views, and there has to be a time when a line has to be drawn in the sand and says, this is the program, this is the time to move on. Either it takes place or it doesn't. And if it is going to be ready by August of next year, I think there was no choice but to move forward.
Yes.
As to whether they should have reopened it, to me that would have just actually been the death knell of the whole process.
Okay, now we're going to be digging deeper into that in the second segment of the show. We shall have MP for Saboti Caleb Hamisi joining us, Gladys Boss-Sholei, who is the Uasin Gishu woman representative, as well as Franklin Mukwanja, SCMD Executive Director, who shall be a part of the conversation as we try and see how we're moving forward with that, the referendum, as opposed to consensus and building consensus and having more views accommodated and more people considered in what they feel should be in that particular document. But let's move on to another big story that made headlines yesterday, or rather broke yesterday. We're told DCI revisits the past. That is according to the Standard newspaper this morning. We're told 12 years later, the DCI boss Kinoti fires warning shot as he reopens probe into 2007-2008 post-election violence cases. Now, the claims 118 people have recorded statements. He has also said that action necessity is necessitated by fresh threats. Also, others call for a full implementation of the WERKI and the KNCHR reports. When you take a look at the Daily Nation this morning, there's a different twist to this particular story and the way they have presented it. They are asking, is he the hunted man? And the he in this particular situation is the Deputy President, William Ruto. So they say, old wounds. The DP predicted in February interview with NTV that a cabal of powerful politicians, political operatives, was working to revive the 2008-2007 post-election violence cases. Yesterday, the Directorate of Criminal Investigation called witnesses to go record on the violence, and the Ruto camp is not happy. More details on page 4, and there are more details on page 5 of the Standard. What do you make of this situation? And obviously the question on many people's mind, given what the nation is saying, is why now?
Yes, I think a lot of people will find it strange, especially the timing, not the substance.
Yes.
of the charges. Everybody knows that what happened in 2007 and 8 was very, very, very bad for this country. A lot of people are displaced. A lot of people are killed. A lot of people are still walking free who perpetrated these crimes. However, I think when you put what we've just discussed, the referendum, and you look at the present politics, and you check the timing of these cases coming up, one can't help but see some political sleight of hand in it.
Right. Now, I'll sample a few tweets that have been put in the Standard's newspaper this morning. Honorable Alice Wahome here says, or tweeted rather, for 12 years, there were no complaints, and statements and action from the DCI. Suddenly, over 70 people today recorded statements on post-election violence. DCI Kinoti, one would be tempted to congratulate you, but oh no, that is a sinister, evil plan you have hatched. Then we have Aaron Cheriot Cheruiyot, also on the same matter, saying very shameful of the DCI, Kinoti, to weave an unending political tale using victims of the post-election violence. Finally, Kimani Ichung'wa says one would honestly sympathize with the DCI. The political circus and shenanigans he's taken through by these political brokers and conmen for fight against corruption, to now the attempt to drive ethnic animosity in the rift to rescue the BBI. What do you make of these sentiments? Very harsh sentiments, very outspoken leaders coming out, not in support of what the DCI is doing. As one has said, one would be tempted to congratulate the DCI, but they are not.
As I said, if you look at the different sentiments, they follow very closely, especially the ones by the political leaders. You will see that they follow very closely which side of the divide they are on the referendum debate.
Yes.
And that's why it's difficult not to feel that there is a political push to revive these cases. And the timing is just, I mean, it's odd.
Yeah.
And I believe we are not going to hear the last of this. Mm-hmm. And I think the biggest danger with this is the DCI may become the center of attention as opposed to the cases themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And if you want to have an interesting, more social stories on page 2 of the Standard this morning that tells us that striking students are a reflection of Kenya's culture of violence. Loosely tied to that, but a firm believer in punishment if it deters negative behavior. And also this has to do with what has been reported on how teenagers have been basically misbehaving and making the headlines across the country over the weekend, all up to now. Now let's take a look at another story that has been making headlines all through the coronavirus. Of course, there's no doubt that this is one of the biggest topics globally and locally. And now we're zeroing in on the situation with medics. We have here a statement that says, or an article that is titled, "You have deserted us," Health Union says. That has to do with the number of specialized doctors that are being hemorrhaged by the medical fraternity, and of course those who work in support of doctors and nurses. And then the champions risking it all to help Kenya beat the virus is another story that gives you an overview of what it is in the life of one of these medics, or those people who work in support, the support staff, and all those who work in helping to nurse the people who have tested positive for coronavirus all through. So Agri, I believe you've read this one. What do you make of what is coming out through this particular story?
I think I'll answer this in 2 parts. The first is about the doctors, the Cuban doctors. Kenya has about 9,400 registered doctors. Out of these, foreign doctors are about 400. And the Cubans are included in the figure of 400. I think it's a drop in the ocean. And we shouldn't be spending too much time arguing about whether Cuban doctors should be here or not, because when you look at the bigger picture, out of 50 million people and about 10,000 doctors, it means we have 1 doctor for every 5,000 people, which is a very, very low figure. And again, when you go and look at those figures, you find out of those 9,000, about nearly 3,000 of them are specialists, which means that only 7,000 are actually available to work in what you might call a level 1, 2, 3 hospitals, which is where most of the everyday mwananchi goes when they're unwell. So there is a great shortage of doctors in Kenya. We should focus on trying to expand our medical capacity, even as we have foreign doctors here. So to me, that should be where we are. On the second side, on the second part of the conversation, I think it's very, very enlightening and to see people being highlighted who perhaps don't make the limelight, who in this fight against the pandemic, there is the morticians who have been shown, there are the cleaners.
Yeah.
There is also the doctors who actually work in the infectious diseases system, who are very quietly risking. All these people are risking their lives, and they have to be really commended. I mean, added to that story is there is a story of PPEs which are being recycled, which is, I think, a very serious matter. And as well, when you consider that there are PPEs lying idle in one big state agency right now, and because of bureaucracy, they are unable to move them out of there.
Indeed. And now there's another story that you might be very interested in, particularly if you're at home and you haven't grabbed your copy of the Standard. That is on page 3. This is the first-hand account of Nakuru Town West MP Samuel Arama of how he tested positive for the coronavirus. His treatment, there's a picture here showing him at his bed, in a room that was isolated at home, undergoing treatment. He has tubes going into him. He was receiving oxygen and also being fed through a tube. He started experiencing chills, developed a fever, pain in the joints, nausea before shortness of breath. The dreaded shortness of breath set in. Mr. Chabeda, what do you make of this account of how he battled through the coronavirus infection?
On the one hand, I would like to say it's very good to hear that the good MP has pulled through, and he's alive and well and has recovered. However, that whole concept of him having oxygen and stuff at his house, I think he should be grateful that he
can afford that?
He had that access, because a lot of people do not. But I think the more human interest story there is his own attitude after he has recovered. I think he has appreciated that this disease is real. He has actually admitted that before, when people were arrested by police for not wearing masks, he would rush to the police stations and would not be very kind to the policemen for doing what they were doing. But after he has come out of this situation, he has appreciated that this corona is real and that it can kill, and he's a lot more appreciative of the efforts by the authorities when they try to enforce the guidelines on trying to keep safe.
Absolutely, and he applauded health workers in Nakuru for their dedication and courage in the fight against the coronavirus. He has confirmed that Nakuru County has the best health facilities, equipment and qualified medical personnel, because he spent 2 weeks on oxygen support machine, intensive treatment and consistent checkups. The only thing with this story is that not everyone would be able to afford this sort of treatment and, of course, attention when they're going through a coronavirus infection. So he's one, indeed, I think, of the lucky ones. Now, let's take a look at the numbers also when it comes to this disease. 413 more coronavirus cases as patients under critical care in hospitals increase. This has been termed a second wave that's happening in portions of the country. 52 patients are in ICU, out of whom 32 are on ventilator support, 16 on supplemental oxygen. Another 86 patients are separately on supplemental oxygen. Out of 74 are in the general wards and 12 are in HDU. What do you make of this? We are over 70,000 in terms of coronavirus infections that have been recorded. What do you make of this?
I think if you look at the statistics again, the level of penetration of the pandemic right now, having been going down, is back to the peak levels that we had in, I think, July of this year. It is very serious. I would just urge the counties once again to really focus on improving their medical facilities. I think there was a lot of talk during the last one that there'd be an expansion of the bed capacities, there'd be an expansion of the ICU beds, there'd be an expansion of the other equipment like oxygen, ventilators. But it turned out once the pandemic started going down, this had not happened, and it did not happen. And it's important that we spread our capacity across the country. If I just go back to the previous statistics, I read that 80% of the specialist doctors are in Nairobi, which just shows you that the actual skew and lack of medical across the country is actually a lot worse than it looks when you do it on an average scale.
Actually, yes. Now, let's take a look at another one that is, as I said earlier on, has been trending. This is a topic that has a lot of tongues wagging across the nation. The teenagers that are being continually caught in houses engaging in drug taking, drinking alcohol, and engaging in sexual activity. Now, we're told on page 4 of the Standard this morning, 40 more teenagers arrested in alcohol-filled house parties. It is unfortunate, this is according to the DCI, that such individuals are doing so not only in contravention of the law, but also ignoring the negative impact their actions have on the lives of minors. And this has to do with those who are facilitating these gatherings. And speaking of those, suspects to remain in custody, those who were caught with the 44 teens, I believe it was on Sunday or Saturday, are going to be staying in custody for 7 more days, of course, as they await justice. The woman, Millicent Muthoni Githinji, was presented at the Milimani Law Courts yesterday. Your take?
I think there are two sides to this. On the one hand, I think parenting definitely has to change. The fact is the way...
But change to what, though?
I think we have to accept that the internet is here, the social media platforms are here. Previously, you could look after your children by just simply looking through the window and you can see they're out playing and you're happy. Today, they could be sitting in your bedroom or in your sitting room and they could be being groomed by people and you have absolutely no idea.
Yes.
So definitely a bigger education drive needs to go so that parents can begin to understand, those who don't, what is happening, so that they have a better control of their environment and the children. Secondly, some of these things being done out there are crimes which are very difficult to detect.
Actually, most of them are crimes.
Yes. So I think the authorities in terms of the police, DCI and others perhaps need to, I'm not assuming they haven't, but they need to have special units with specially specialists who can are in a position to monitor and detect this kind of activities so that they are better able to nip them in the bud when they happen. Because I think with the normal policing practices, they are just in as difficult a position as the parents are. And as you can see, some of these things are coming out after they're exposed by third parties. Yes.
But when it comes to now policing also, there needs to be something different done because the laws do not stretch as far as the internet does. So what do you think should be done in that aspect to safeguard minors?
I think the laws, to me, safeguarding minors are fairly adequate. The difficulty is in actually apprehending the very sophisticated people who go around them. And what should happen is once these people are apprehended, as I said, we need specialists who can gather evidence to a level whereby these people will not slip through the holes and get away with it, and they are put away. Because if you look at the laws against minors, for example, if you defile a minor, the punishments are very, very severe.
Yes.
What we need to see is these people actually getting to the point where they are convicted.
Yes. Now, speaking of convictions for such humans, we have a story on page 3 of the Daily Nation told family in agony after teen triplets defiled by farmhands, all 4 pregnant with twins. We're told distraught parents welcome 6 babies from their 3 16-year-old daughters who now face a dreary future. Their defiler is on the run. Your reaction? Yeah,
that's a very, very sad story. And I think I really hope that whoever was the culprit is brought to book. But it's just one of those things. I think in any environment, parents are looking after their children, and sometimes if you are not monitoring them closely, just like in the other cases. Because this is happening
in the home.
Yes, it's happening in the home.
Yeah.
It is alleged that it's the gardener who was responsible. So clearly, perhaps the parents failed to see the signs as they took place. It's a difficult situation to really say what could and should not have happened because there is a certain level of trust within an environment, home environment.
Yeah, but speaking of trust, these are children, 3 girls, who are not telling this to each other or to their parents, because they have been quoted here saying, we did not know he was having an affair with all of us because we don't share that bit of our lives with each other. So perhaps if we're going to talk about changing parenting, then communication should be something that should be factored in a different way.
Definitely, this was a case of a serious breakdown in communication, both between the sisters, and between the sisters and the parents, and between the sisters and the mother and the father. And the result is what we have read. And the other sad part of the story is the suggestion that when they wanted to, they were about to go to full term, it was being suggested that each of them should lose one of the babies as a way of keeping the other or saving their lives. But the mother then managed to take them to an institution, a medical institution, where that was ruled aside and they had cesarean.
Yeah,
yes.
And I'm lost for words as we think about how that could actually be a situation in a home. 6 new babies, but as they say, babies are a blessing, but that situation seems to be, it is pretty unfortunate. Now let's take a look at page 6 of the Daily Nation. We're told bill lays out tough penalties on drug trade. There's a crackdown that's being pictured here on page 6 of the Daily Nation, and we're told stiff fines and other penalties including life in jail await drug barons. We're told the bill, which is before the National Assembly on Administration and National Security, seeks to fine drug traffickers stiffer fines of between 50 million shillings and 100 million shillings. Nabbing drug barons has been a huge problem in the country. We have had situations in the past where the United States had to, these people were extradited to the United States, and only then was justice meted out. What do you make of this, and could this be the answer to ensuring that the drug menace is dealt with in the country?
Personally, I don't think it is. The drug business is a very vicious business. We saw that for the Akashas who were in the U.S., who were eventually jailed, it had to take them to go to the U.S. for it to happen.
Right.
Because I think we know that, and it's not just a Kenyan problem, whenever you have drug barons, they infiltrate all sectors of the society, law enforcement and justice system.
Indeed. Okay,
and it becomes a very, very difficult thing. So just bringing in new laws and new punishments, to me, is just fudging the reality, that we need to focus more on trying to find out how they manage to infiltrate the systems and get away with literally with murder. Yes.
Now, on page 12, we're told about the COVID-19 millionaires' faces have started to emerge. So if you're curious about who these people are or what that situation is, it's developing, take a look at that paper and see what's cooking. But for now, we're going to take a short break. Remember, on the other side, we're discussing the possibility of a referendum, actually the referendum that is coming, the push for that, as well as consensus building, why that is important or not. Stay tuned to Morning Express.